So for me, what I would have written on that card was the day that I watched my grandma forget my name, and then she forgot how to walk, and then she forgot how to talk, and then eventually she was just simply existing, um, just her body, but her mind and her memory was just completely gone. So she had Alzheimer's. And it was really, really tough to bear. And it wasn't just her suffering that was really hard. It was just watching like my family break down, my dad, in a way that I had just never seen before. And of course, like anyone, just went back to the same question: why God? Why? Why would God allow this? Right? And I'm not alone in asking that. Right? When we ask, why do these bad things happen? It usually continues with, why did this happen to them? To me, to those I really care about, where was God in this? In Romans 12:15, it says, rejoice with those who rejoice, weep with those who weep. When answering this question, it's important to remember we're all just emotional beings. And sometimes when people ask this question, it's just a question asked out of emotion. And just with that being said, I want to just try to just push the emotional aspect to the side, which I know is hard, but just for a moment, I want to try to walk us through the thoughts intellectually and spiritually on how Christians can make sense of this. So, we often hear, existence of pain, it's the ultimate gotcha for faith, right? But there's just a very profound irony that is here, right? Pain can only be a problem if there's a standard of good that actually exists, right? If the universe were just cold, accidental byproduct of physics, then pain wouldn't be bad. It would just be a reaction, atoms kind of bumping into one another. But we obviously don't feel that way, right? We feel that something's wrong. By calling the world evil, we are inadvertently pointing to a standard of good, right? And that's not just an opinion, but it's got to be a standard set by a creator, right? So when someone says, evil proves God doesn't exist, we need to kind of rephrase that and say, the existence of evil proves that there's an objective standard that does exist. Now, if all of this is true so far, then we still have to ask the next question and say, it has to be about God's power, right? If he's the one who set the standard, why on earth does he allow these things to be broken so often? So C.S. Lewis, famous theologian from Oxford, he once summarized the problem in this way. He said, if God were good, he would want to make his creatures happy. If God were almighty, he would do what he wished. But the creatures are not happy. Therefore, God either lacks goodness or power, or both. So this makes sense, right? So let's try to frame what C.S. Lewis is saying here. Right. So let's take a look at each one, right? Because so far we know that this is true, right? The creatures are not happy. We all experience suffering of some sort. Let's start with right here. If God were almighty, could he do what he wished, right? All right, so I'm going to give you guys a task. On the back of your card or something, I will personally give you my credit card, and you can buy whatever you want on it. But all you have to, there's not a lot of money on it, so it's not going to do much. But I will give you the card, and all you have to do, I'll give you 10 seconds, just draw me a square circle. All right, yeah, obviously, right, a few moments we're like, nobody can, right? Even though you might be willing, right? You're like, I want to draw this square circle. It just can't be done, right? It's not because you're weak. It's not because you're not powerful enough. It's just because a square circle, it's just a logical contradiction, right? It's just nonsense, right? And even an all-powerful God doesn't do nonsense. He's not going to make 2 + 2 = 5, right? So when people say God is omnipotent, right? That omnipotence means the power to do all things that are possible, right? So this is just a contradiction. It's not a limitation of strength. So think about it for a second, right? If God were to create a world, right, where you have real freedom but are forced to do only good, that doesn't make sense because it's contradictory. It's forced freedom. You might say, what if he doesn't force our freedom? What if maybe he can bend the rules of physics and evil could just never happen, right? So to bend those rules of physics would kind of be sort of the forced freedom as well. So think about it like this. Right? Let's say I'm super angry at Armel, right? And I want to kill Armel, right? Oh, big word, yeah. Right? And I have a gun or something, right? And I pick it up I'm sorry, Armel. And I pick it up and I fire the gun at Armel, right? At what point, come back, Armel. At what point does it make sense for God to intervene, right? If the argument is that he's not all powerful, then at what point does he intervene on the laws of physics of this natural world with these rules he created, right? Does he stop the bullet from firing? Does he turn it into a marshmallow? Does he stop the thought in my head before I think about it, right? Even if he does these things, he doesn't fix evil. He's kind of just deleted me as a person. He's turned me into a puppet or something. He is all-powerful, but it doesn't make sense that he grants freedom and withholds the consequences of that freedom at the same time. Is he weak because he follows these rules? Absolutely not. He's consistent. This is a God of rationality and reason. And a God who constantly broke his own laws of physics would be a God of chaos, not one of order and truth. This is the next premise, right? If God were all good, this is what C.S. Lewis says, he would want to make his creatures happy. All right, well, what would that look like? Wouldn't a good God want to prevent suffering by just removing our ability to hurt one another? Right? If God needs to get rid of all suffering, what would he need to do? To do that, he would have to remove the very thing that makes us human. That is our choice. Right? Without a choice to possibly do evil, we would just essentially be robots. But God did not want to just create robot children who only behave in the way that he wants. He wants to give us a choice to obey him and to do good, but that also leaves the possibility to reject him. So imagine, right, you're proposing to somebody, right, and you use like this magic spell or something, and then they say yes, right? When you go to that wedding, it would not be any celebration of any sort of love. It would be very fake, right? You'd go home knowing that the other person really doesn't love you. They're just unable to say no. For God to have a real relationship with us, he has to leave the no on the table. Without that possibility of rejection, love is impossible. Up to this point, we've spoken about the standard of good. We've looked into God being all-powerful, and we've looked into God being all good, right? But still, there's a lot left, and a lot of things that are much harder to explain. So 2004, it was the day after Christmas. Thousands of tourists had traveled to the beaches of Thailand, Sri Lanka, Indonesia. And at 7:59 a.m., a 9.1 magnitude earthquake, one of the largest ever recorded, ripped through an undersea fault in the Indian Ocean, causing a massive tsunami toward the shores. The tsunami would be the deadliest in recorded history, taking 230,000 lives in a matter of hours. So when you look at that, you just ask, like, how can someone explain this? Cursed is the ground because of you. Thorns and thistles it shall bring forth. So this is in Genesis 3:17, 19. It tells us that the world we live in is not the one that God originally intended. After man sinned against God in the Garden of Eden, the original perfect creation became corrupt. And what was introduced because of the fall? Chaos, sin, death. Even to this day, we still experience that suffering. And as stated in Romans 8, we know that the whole world, the whole creation has been groaning together as it suffers together. So the Bible suggests that human rebellion introduced this kind of decay into the world. Natural disasters, disease, death aren't acts of God, but the symptoms of a creation that lost its original peace. And while this kind of might be some type of explanation, it's still left with, why would God just allow them to occur? Well, one thing to say about just natural disasters, first of all, it's that they're neutral, right? They're neither good nor bad themselves. What do I mean by that, right? Right? Hurricanes, they replenish the fresh water, balance global heat. Earthquakes, they move the tectonic plates necessary for the shaping of the planet, and that recycles the Earth crust. It needs to happen. The world has to keep spinning, and it's going to have these natural occurrences. But in hindsight, right, when we look at it, it's actually not the natural disaster that's bad. It's when it hurts, right? It's when it takes away. It's when there's infliction because of it. But man, why doesn't God just intervene? I mean, like, I get that they're natural, but if it's so much suffering, right, shouldn't God just intervene? But how do we know that he doesn't? More than that, I think it's true that we can't always see the whole picture, right? But God can see the picture. I mean, he's God after all. but we only see a very small, limited part of reality. And so, is it possible that God can allow some of this suffering to bring about some meaning into our world? So this winter break, I was really happy to be home, to be honest with you. I was back with my parents and my family. I was in my room. I was reading Harry Potter, and then real suddenly, like, my mom entered the room. She goes, "Jonathan, Jonathan, Jonathan," and I could already see like a lot of like concern in her eyes. She goes, we need to go to New York. Your grandfather just had a heart attack." And I was like really shaken up. After driving, we drove up an hour to Queens. We quickly rushed upstairs, and there he was, just kind of laid out on the hospital bed. And I was like, I was terrified, right? I was afraid, I was nervous, anxious, right? All these emotions kind of building up. But all I could do was just like pray continuously. So after a week of being on break, I'd gone to New York back and forth every single day. So it was a very tough week, but later on I was able to see something that came out of this time. Prior to that, I really didn't have much of a relationship with my grandfather. I had only met up with him a couple of times before that, but God allowed this situation to reconnect us, right? It allowed us to love one another, to have this compassion. And I couldn't really see it in the moment, but it allowed me to share the gospel with my family, to be reminded that we have a life that isn't promised. So in Hebrews 12, so no discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it. In both my case, we wouldn't have guessed it, right? How could I have like a reason for that suffering? And in the present, we just felt like the pain. But in retrospect, we saw a lot of redemption. So I'm going to ask this very, very gently, but maybe is it possible that not all suffering is bad? In John 9, story of Jesus interacting with a man who was born blind. "Neither this man nor his parents sinned," said Jesus, "but this happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him." Again, right, it's not preferred. No one wants to be blind, right? Blindness is not good, yet there was still a reason for it. That is the side of suffering that we sometimes miss, and again, it's because we don't always see the whole picture. God can, and God does, bring good out of terrible tragedies, and very often, he allows kind of these consequences to play out. And so, maybe as believers, the proper response to suffering is to trust in God. All right, so if you're still with me, I know I've just thrown a lot of like logical arguments, these big, fancy words, and whether you agree with them or not, right? I know that for some that probably isn't enough, and I totally get it. You look at the news, you look at a sick family member, you look at the bad things happening in the world. For me personally, it's when I remember my grandmother, and there's just not any amount of logic, right, I could say to you or to myself that would make that better. Right? Everyone experiences pain. Atheists, Buddhists, agnostics, Muslims, Christians, right? Everyone experiences pain. But in the Christian view, pain is not just this biological accident. In Christianity, pain is given a purpose. I look at kind of those very dark moments, and if it weren't for that pain, I really never would have known God the way that I do now. I'm really grateful because it allowed me to be like right here, where I am, like with all you guys, meeting you guys, getting to know you guys, seeing a lot of you guys grow in your faith. I don't claim to have every answer, but I've wrestled with this question as well. And I know that God's response to our pain is not just like a Canva lecture, PowerPoint or something, but it's the gospel, right? Got to look all the way back in the beginning. Human suffering existing because sin exists. It wasn't part of God's original design, but humanity turned away from God's command. The door opened for death. God created a world with real choice possible, and knowing these choices would lead to a fallen state. He allows these natural consequences of a broken world to play out. But he doesn't just sit in the distance and tell us to kind of just deal with it ourselves. His response is to share in that suffering, to take it upon himself. Jesus didn't just talk about a standard of good. He was that standard of good. Yet he suffered the ultimate injustice. He was betrayed, beaten, shamed, mocked, and then eventually crucified. Why? Because he wanted to be God with us. In those moments when you cry out, God, do you even know what this feels like? When you look at the cross, his answer is yes. He didn't cause the suffering, but he took it upon himself so that it wouldn't have the final word. Jesus didn't sin, but he suffered that injustice. And in doing so, he made a way possible to redeem it. He's near to the brokenhearted. And his response to suffering is not abandonment, it's redemption. Everyone who puts their faith in Jesus will be saved. And he offers this gift to anyone, including you today. He knows the fullness of suffering, human suffering, in a way that we do not. Yet he also knows the fullness of joy that comes with redemption. It's true, he may allow suffering for his good purposes, to refine us, to test our faith, or to display his power, but he never does it as a distant observer. He walks through that fire with us. I still wrestle with this why, especially on the days that I miss the people that I love the most. But Jesus leaves us with this beautiful promise in John 16:33 before he gets crucified. And he says, I have said these things to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you have tribulation, but take heart. I have overcome the world. Thank you, guys.